Welcome everyone. So it's incredible times we're living in. I have to say something about it. You can't not say something about what's going on in Israel. And I was going to say something totally differently, but this morning I was davening Shachris, and you say like in Tachnan on Mondays, we say, what's the pasuk? You say, we're like sheep to the slaughter. We've been like Maka, beaten, downtrodden, cherpa, embarrassed. Even though we've gone through all these crazy hardships, we don't forget Hashem. Hashem's like watching us, protecting us. And it's just like it hit me that, like, that's not the situation anymore. That's just not the situation. So how much more so do you have to like not forget Hashem? Even when we were downtrodden, we didn't forget Hashem. We realized like it's been a shemayim. But now when you see like the nisim gluim, kavachayim, you have to realize, kavachayim, you have to realize that like it's just been a shemayim. And you hear people saying that, like, it's really funny. Just another thing I'll just say is that you hear people saying like, oh, turns out that Iran was a paper tiger. In other words, we basically, to put it in a nutshell, we basically destroyed the entire Iranian army without one soldier losing a hair on his head, right? They managed to do some terrorist acts and kill some innocent civilians here, right? But a guy with a knife could have done probably worse. But the fact that all they could do is just try and kill innocent civilians, and that's what they've done. They haven't touched one soldier. They haven't hit one strategic thing. And that's just Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem.
They did, you just don't know about it.
That could be. The point is that the only thing that matters is what we hear about, right? The fact that they hit a drone apparently, and but the fact that either way we took down the entire Iranian military. Now people are saying, "Oh, it's a paper tiger. Look how weak they were." The fact is that America was petrified to touch them. They're petrified. The greatest army in the history of the world, 10 times greater than any other army. As far as how much they have weapons and planes, they're scared because they know that if they send 1,000 ballistic missiles at their bases, they're up the creek. The history. Right. Any other country, no other country could have done what we did without being drastically knocked out.
They were able to bring the B-2 bombers in a clear field.
We cleared the path for them. They did nothing.
That's it. They drove in, did their thing, and drove out.
Yeah. We did everything for them. Trump asked them to take off all the radars down south. Basically, Israel did the whole thing. Incredible. But the point is that, and we can't say this anymore. We should take this line out of Shachris.
There's still, trust me, there's still what to say.
Still what to say.
There's always going to be what to say.
Right. Okay. So we're in Makos Daf Yud Dom and base. Now the reason why we didn't learn the last week isn't because of the war, it's because this Amud is so hard. It took me like a week to understand it. I'm not a droshes guy, but I think eventually I got it. Okay, so the Gemara starts, top line, Machose da ratio. So basically the Gemara wanted to know where we have a passage, Achos Aviv, Achos Imai. How do you know that someone's also Achos Aviv and also Achos Imai? Someone's a full sister. How do you know that person gets Malchus? Has to bring a carbon. Machaisai dereisha. There's another chaisai dereisha. Rashi says it could have said kikach ishes bas oviv bas imai. Achaisai is a sister. Well, I know if it's bas oviv bas imai, of course it's his sister. So why are you throwing in the words? Why is the Torah add the words achaisai to tell me that if it's a full sister, you also chayiv? That was the shita. So what does the other man hold? What does he do with the chaisai dereisha? What does he do with this pasuk of a chaisai? He used this pasuk to be mechalek, to tell me there's two lavim with mefatem or two chiyuvei kares for mefatem and sach. We said mefatem is someone that copies the Shemen HaMishcha, and sach is someone that bathes in the Shemen HaMishcha. So you might think there's only one lav because it says in the same pasuk, both together. This is v'nichrasu on both of them. There isn't, does say v'nichrasu on each one. There's one v'nichrasu for both of these isurim. So how do you know that each one has its own issa? So if you can't use a chaysa for the sister, because we know the sister, Use it for someone completely differently. Use it for mefata and v'sach. Each one has a chiyuv kares. Ve'idach, what does he say? Savak Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shua. Where does he know mefata mesach from? Ve'idach, Savak Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shua. That says, Dama Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shua. His shita is Komakim Shadam Meitzer Shnei Lavim V'Kares Echad. Anywhere in the Torah where there's two lavim, but it only says one time kares. Chalukim hela carbon. They each have to bring their own carbon. In other words, for each kares, you have to bring a carbon. So if there's two lavim, it says don't do this and don't do that. And then it says, and you get a kares if you do it. For each avera you do, you have to bring a carbon. Each one has a chiv kares. You could say, he doesn't have to hold like Rabbi Elazar. There's another way to learn this. He doesn't learn from Rabbi Elazar ben Yeshua that anytime there's two lavim and one kares, you have to bring two korbanos. So where does he know from? There's a different drasha. It says in the pasuk, someone that takes isha dova, she's menstruating. So what do we learn from here? And this is in the pasuk v'nichrasu. There's kares. Someone that sleeps with a woman who's nida, you get kares, and that's extra because you already have a pasuk that says the isha dova has kares. So use this extra pasuk to tell me this drasha. You have a spare pasuk here. From this spare pasuk, we're going to learn that mefate mesach, two lavim, you get two chiyuvei kares. So what does the other mandama do with this pasuk? Ve'idach, what does he do with this pasuk? He uses this pasuk to tell me the din of Rabbi Yechanan. What's the din of Rabbi Yechanan? Dam Rabbi Yechanan mishum Shimon ben Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Yochanan says, Mishum ben Yochai, minayin shein isha tmeya ad sheyotza madve derech avosa. A woman is only tmeya if the blood from a rechem comes out derech avosa from oisei makom. Shenema v'isha sheyishka v'isha dava v'gila es avosa. It's only if he's megala avosa, he reveals her erva. Melamed she'ena isha tmeya. The blood has to come out of a uterus. It's not enough if the blood comes out of the stomach. So if a woman cuts her stomach, she does an injection, or she has a C-section, and blood comes out from the stomach, she's not tameh. How do I know that? From this pasuk. Rav Shimon ben Yochai says, the blood has to come out from the uterus, not from the wall of the stomach. Even though we're talking about the same blood, obviously, right? But it depends where it's coming out from. And so the
blood.
Huh? Even though it's a blood from the uterus, it has to come out from Makos.
Right, but I'm saying,
even though it's blood from the rechem,
yeah,
it has to come out from a uterus as opposed to from the stomach.
Right.
So if she has a C-section, she's not going to be tameh.
or she has internal bleeding or whatever.
Or whatever. If she has an operation, or she does those injections, the weight loss injections, she goes a bit too far, blood comes out, I don't know if that's possible. She injects in the wrong place. She's not tameh. That's not called tameh. What the Rishonim ask is, so what does the other man dama hold here? And then we've got two dots. This is the end of that. This is the end of this little sugya here. So what does the other man dama hold? He holds that l'chayra, says the Ritva, if the blood, she is tameh if it comes out from the wall of the stomach. So you're going to have a machlaikas if a woman's going to be tameh, you'll see the Ritva, if her how do you call it, blood period? If a period comes out from the wall of the stomach, she's going to be tameh. And he says no. Reb Shimon bar Yochai says you're not tameh. And Reb Ritva says, you know what? Huh? That she's not tameh. Yeah, of course. Now it's only a Ritva that says she is going to be tameh. We're going to see other people say, well, there's no shita like that. Basically, what the Ritva says is this mandama holds. There's a machlekes by a woman who gives birth, the Eitzet Daifen. A woman has a C-section. People think it didn't exist in those days. It did exist. A woman has a C-section. Is she tameh? So Reb Shimon bar Yochai says she is tameh. Sorry, Reb Shimon bar Yochai says she's not tameh. And Chacham say she is tameh. So you see, there's a shita that holds you could be tameh from a C-section. What the Achronim says, I don't understand. There's two kashas on that. First of all, the shitas are the opposite. Here Reb Shimon says she's not tameh. There by C-section, Reb Shimon says she is tameh. Right? And second of all, here we're talking about dam nida. We're not talking about birth. There, the shaila is giving birth. He gave birth. He gave birth through a C-section. He gave birth through the uterus. Tome, right? Maybe you're tome. But here we're talking about dam nida. There's no sad bichlal that
If
you're
you give
tome.
birth once, yeah, but if you give birth naturally,
Yeah.
then she's tummy.
She's tome, yeah.
Yeah.
But with a C-section, it's a machlaikas.
She's not tummy.
Reb Shimon says she's not tome. Chacham says she is tome. So you see that there's there's two kashas. First of all, you see Reb Shimon has the opposite shita. Here he seems to be saying that she's not tome niddah from the stomach, but she is tome if she gives birth through the stomach. Why? What's the difference? Second of all, why would you assume just because if she gives birth through the stomach? If the chachamim there say if she has a C-section, she's tome. If she has a C-section, she's not tome. So why here she should be tome with dam niddah? It's a kasha on the ritva. Okay, I don't have all the answers.
How do we hold?
If a woman
for a C-section.
for a C-section, well nowadays a woman's midrabanan, any blood she sees anyway, she's tame. Even if the water breaks, we give her like the full midrabanan. Here we're talking about biblically midrabanan. Now she's tame for any blood, right? But
By the way,
the fascinating sugya, huh?
By the way, they call it C-section
From
because of
Caesar.
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 Right,
I know, but I saw like scientists saying that it has to be a mistake because if you Google it, they'll tell you it's a mistake because it's impossible that they did C-sections in those days. They would have died and they would have. And I'm like, it's a version like Perik in the Gemara and Shas, a whole Perik about Yetzidayfin. But yeah, Google it, you'll see. They all say it's not true. That's not why it was called Caesar. It wasn't a C-section. Very strange. Okay, just goes to show you the history. They don't check up with Chazal before. The historians don't check out the Gemara before they paskin. Okay. Says the Gemara. Now, a quick akdama to the next Gemara. We're going to be dealing with two types of Isurim. Walking into the base of Mikdash, it says in Pasuk. It says in Pasuk, B'chol kodesh le'siga ve'lamikdash le'sova. He puts them together. And the Gemara is going to say there's a hekdesh between these two. You can't go into the mikdash tamei, and you can't eat hekdesh food tamei. So two things. One is going into the base of Mikdash, and the other thing is eating. And then there's another issue with eating. There's eating the tamei, eating hekdesh food, and then we're going to be discussing touching. Not eating, just touching. Are you allowed to touch? And then we're going to be discussing the same thing by truma. Can you touch truma or can you eat truma? So I'm just giving you the headlines. You shouldn't get confused because it's a little bit confusing. So it says Gemara. With the fourth last narrow line. V'tamei sha'achal es ha'kodesh. Bishlema, it's all very well. Habola mikdash, someone who walked into the base of mikdash tamei. He's chayiv malchus. Why? Ksiv oynesh. V'chsiv azhara. It says in the Torah the punishment, and it says a warning. The warning means don't do it, and if you do it, so you get kares, right? Oynesh tichsiv. What's the punishment? Tichsiv es mishkan Hashem timei v'nichrusa. The guy gets kares. So what's Azhara? Azhara, it says v'lo yitam es machaneyem. It says v'lo yitam es machaneyem. Don't make the machaneh tamei. So it says Azhara, v'lo yitam es machaneyem. It says the punishment v'nichrusa. So you've got both. You've got by Mikdash Azhara and Oynesh. Elo, now ask the Gemara. Tomei she'ochel es HaKodesh. What about eating Kodesh? So Bishlema Oynesh, the punishment it says the punishment. Ksiv v'nefesh shetoichel basa mezevach shlomim asher Hashem. Someone that eats basa shlomim v'tumosay olav, and he's tamei. We're in the first white line. V'nichusa. So that's the punishment. It says clearly someone that eats when he's tamei v'nichusa. He gets kares. Ela Azhara minayin. Where does it say you can't eat hekdesh? Kodesh. Where does it say you can't eat kodesh? So we have the Gemara says we have a punishment. V'nichusa it says. But Azhara minayin, where do we have a warning? So Reish Lakish Amar, the two guys always fought each other. He took a son-in-law, brother-in-law, was it his brother-in-law? Then he never stopped fighting with him, right? Reish Lakish Amar, it says, B'chol kodesh le'siga. It says in the pasuk, B'chol kodesh le'siga. Don't touch any kodesh. So from here he sees, It's a warning also, don't eat Kodesh. It says don't touch Kodesh, don't eat Kodesh. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan has a different limud. He learned that Tani Bardala, it's a machlekes if this Bardala was a Tana or not, but Pashas was a Tana. Bardala said, Asya to Mosai. There's a Gzera Shava. It says here to Mosai, Oy to Mosai, Allah we just saw. By walking to the Mikdash, it says to Mosai. And it says, don't touch, to Mosai. Ksif hacha v'tu Mosai Allah, v'nichrasa, v'ksif hasam, tomeyiyah, oy to Mosai boy. So there's a Gzera Shava. It says it to the word to Mosai. It says the word to Mosai. And it's like the lights up. If this says it to Mosai, says that to Mosai, we can learn out one from the other. Malahalan oynesh v'azhara. Just like walking into the Mikdash, says to Mosai, there's a punishment, there's a warning, there's a oynesh and azhara. Afkan oynesh v'azhara. So here also, you give it the oynesh v'azhara. The azhara transfers from walking into the Mikdash to eating Kodesh. Bishlama Nagamara. Bishlama Reish Lakish Layamak Rabbi Yochanan. Why does Reish Lakish, who brought this pasuk of B'chol Kodesh Leisiga, why doesn't he say like Rabbi Yochanan to Mosai? This Gzera Shava. Bishlama Reish Lakish like Rabbi Yochanan Gzera Shava Legomer. He didn't have this Gzera Shava. You can't make up your own Gzera Shavas. Gzera Shava is only anything that there's a Meseira from your Rebbe till Moshe Rabbeinu. This lights up. You can make this Gzera Shava. Reish Lakish never had the Gzera Shava. That's why he didn't learn it. That's why Reish Lakish doesn't say like Rabbi Yochanan. But why does Rabbi Yochanan not say like Reish Lakish? Alo Rabbi Yochanan, my time alone like Reish Lakish. Why does Rabbi Yochanan not say like Reish Lakish? So Amalach, Rabbi Yochanan says, this pasuk of, the pasuk says again, B'chol Kodesh Lo Siga, Hu Asar Truma. That pasuk is referring to Truma. That pasuk isn't talking about Kodesh, Kodshim, all that type of stuff. It's talking about Truma. A guy has fruit in his field and he takes off a little bit for the Kayin. That you can't eat. Right. He took Maisa, he took whatever it is, Truma, you can't eat it. V'nichrasa. Also. Now what they ask over is, I don't understand, Rabbi Yochanan has a Gzera Shava, right? How could you ask on him, why didn't you say Reish Lakish? He has a Gzera Shava, that's why I don't say Reish Lakish. The Gemara asks, why does Rabbi Yochanan not say like Reish Lakish? Because he has a Gzera Shava, he doesn't have to learn from a pasuk. He's got a Gzera Shava, what do you want from the guy? He's got a Gzera Shava, that's why he doesn't say like Reish Lakish. So maybe what it means is, I don't know, I haven't seen this inside, maybe what it means is, what do you need the Gzera Shava for? Once you have that pasuk, you don't need the Gzera Shava, that's probably the kasha. Amalach, so why does he not hold like Reish Lakish? Amalach hu asar l'truma. So this is the shita of Rabbi Yochanan, that the pasuk of B'chol Kodesh Leisiga, that's talking about Truma. It's not talking about Kodesh. It says Kodesh there, but really it means Truma. Reish Lakish, if that's true, the Rabbi Yochanan has like a drasha for Truma. If Rabbi Yochanan has a drasha for Truma, how does Reish Lakish know Truma? Reish Lakish asar l'truma min alef. So how does Reish Lakish know Truma? How does Reish Lakish know that if Yisrael eats Truma, he's chayv kares? Nafkalei, he learns it from a different pasuk. He learns out ish ish mizera Aaron. And the Gemara says ish ish means actually a man and a woman. Mizera Aaron vutza roizov. And the pasuk says, if you read, I don't know if you got the Rashi over here, the little Rashi, ish ish mizera Aaron vutza roizov, b'kachim lo yochel ad shayitar. So you can't eat. It says loy. So that's the azara. It says ish ish. Don't eat. And what's he talking about here? Which Issa applies to all of Zara Aaron not to eat? Because it applies to women also. That's how Rashi explains. Women also have the Issa to Truma b'tumah. So this pasuk of Ish Ish Mizar Aaron is talking about Tumah. This is where he knows the Issa to eat Truma from. So again, Rabbi Yochanan learns out from B'chol Kodesh Siga, you can't eat Truma, the Tumah, if you're Tameh, And Rabbi Yochanan learns, and Reish Lakish learns from this pasuk of Ish Ish B'Zera Aaron that you can't eat truma if you're tamei. Ve'idach. So what's he going to do with this pasuk? What does Rabbi Yochanan need b'chol kodesh l'siga then for? If you got this pasuk, ahul achila v'hala negiah. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, by truma there's two isurim. By truma there's going to be two isurim by truma. One is called b'chol kodesh l'siga, you can't touch, and one is you can't eat. So according to Reish Lakish, there's only one isur by truma, eating truma. You can't eat truma. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, there's two isurim by truma, eating truma and touching truma. It says in the Torah, b'chol kodesh l'siga.
So you get two punishments?
When he touches the truma, he's laika. When he eats it, he's laika.
Okay.
Take a look at Taisus Ehud, the top Taisus. Normally Taisus is harder than Gemara, but because these old droshes, Taisus is easier than Gemara. Take a look at Taisus. Taisus says, Hahula trum hudasa, v'tema. This is astonishing. Why would truma be more severe than kachim? The b'chol kodesh l'siga mukil Rabbi Yochanan legia is truma, because the kodesh l'siga is talking about truma. Al malaki. So Rabbi Yochanan says, you get if someone touches truma when he's tamei, he gets good old malchus. But the kodesh leilaki. If a guy touches kodesh, he doesn't get malchus. So you see here, the truma is much more chomer than kachim. Why would you get malchus for truma? But you get malchus. You touch truma, malchus. You touch kachim, you don't get malchus. It's kapella. Normally kachim is much more chomer than truma. But here's our shleimim Darus. Where's Darus? Anyone knows? In France, probably. Darvaish. When it says you can't touch the truma, it doesn't mean you get malchus. No. But the truma now becomes posel. That's how he learns. But truma becomes posel, you don't get malchus. The Ritva said, the Meiri says, you know why it might be? Since truma is much more lenient and much more common, so the Torah maybe does like chiluk zera d'Rabbanan. If you touch it, you get malchus, because we're worried if you touch it, you're going to eat it. By kodesh, we're not worried the kohen is going to start eating when he's tamei kodesh, so you don't have to make it. You don't have to make it. You don't have to make it. What's it called? You do not have to make it also to touch, because we're not worried. We're not that worried he's going to eat it. But the Achronim ask an interesting kasha, right? Listen to this. Achronim ask, I don't understand. What's Taisus kasha? Taisus says, how could it be that truma is so much more chomer than kachim? Truma you can't touch, you get malchus. Kachim, if you touch, you don't get malchus. I don't understand. Chayra, right? We have a klal, ein nonshim min adin. You don't give a bigger punishment to the more serious crime. You can't say, oh, if you get malchus for this, and this is more chomer, you get malchus for that. You can't say that, right? Why? Because the Chodim explained, because maybe that punishment isn't enough to deal with the Issa, to deal with the Avera. Now you might get malchus for a light Issa. If you do a more serious Issa, maybe the malchus doesn't take care of that Issa. So we can't say if you get malchus for doing A, if you still get malchus for doing B. Maybe malchus isn't enough. You're just giving a guy lashes for no reason, right? So maybe over here, truma is lighter. You give him malchus to deal with as avera, but you touch a carbon batame, malchus doesn't do the trick. That's what the kasha is. So what the Maharsha explains is, he says beautiful theories. He says because the Gemara says when you eat the kodesh tamei, you get malchus, right? So it can't be pshat that eating the touching it's not as chomer as eating it. If when you eat it, malchus gets rid of the avera, so kavachayma, touching it should get rid of malchus should get rid of it. So why would you not get malchus for touching kodesh? If you get malchus for touching truma, and you get Makos for eating Kodesh, you should for sure get Makos for touching Kodesh. Okay. Let's go back to Gemara. So, Rish Lakish. Asar l'truba minali. How does Rish Lakish know? Whoever lost the place with the sixth white line, middle of the sixth white line. Rish Lakish, Asar l'truba minali. How does Rish Lakish know that truma, there's a warning that Tomei can't eat truma? Nafkilei, he gets it from a different pasuk. Sorry, we saw the Ishish Avatzur Azov. Sorry, we did this already. Okay, very Lakish. Now the Gemara is on the first white line and the tenth white line. Very Lakish. Habachal Kodesh Siga. Now he's going back to the original sheet of Rish Lakish. Rish Lakish said, B'chol Kodesh Siga. Does Rish Lakish really use this pasuk, B'chol Kodesh Tiga, to tell me that if you touch hektish, you get Malkus? Does it really come to tell me that? We need this you need this to tell me that if a Tomei touches Kodesh, he gets Malkus. How do I know? That Ditmar, it says Tomei shenoga b'Kodesh, someone that's Tomei that touches Kodesh. Rish Lakish Amar loike, Rabbi Yechanama einai loike. It's machlekes. So Rish Lakish says if you touch Tomei, you get Malkus. Why? Rish Lakish Amar loike. How do you know you get Malkus? B'chol Kodesh Siga. It says in the pasuk, B'chol Kodesh Siga. He uses this pasuk to tell me that you get Malkus for touching. So how can Rish Lakish use this to tell me you get Malkus for eating? Rabbi Yechonai ma'ena leika. Rabbi Yechonai says you don't get Malkus. Who asar l'trumud also? Because B'chol Kodesh Siga, as we said before, that is a warning for truma, not to eat truma. So Gemara answers, Tomei shenaga b'Kodesh. How does he know Tomei shenaga b'Kodesh? Mid'apkei rachmana b'loshen negiya. Since it tells me that, according to Rish Lakish now, since it tells me the issa of eating Kodesh, but it doesn't say don't eat Kodesh, just don't touch Kodesh, right? Mid'apkei rachmana b'loshen negiya uses the loshen negiya, and as hara la'oichel. How do we know we're talking about how you can't eat? Because iskish Kodesh le'mikdash. He again uses this hekesh of Kodesh le'mikdash. It's important to take a look in Rashi, the first wide line in Rashi. Mid is Kodesh le'mikdash. Rashi says, "B'haikra b'chol Kodesh l'siga v'al-mikdash le'sovai." It says those two things in the pasuk. There's a hekesh, one to the other. The Dashina l'kaman, the Gemara learns, Ma mikdash yesh ba'zaros and netilas neshama shabal mikdash tomei b'kares. Walking into the mikdash tomei gets kares. Afas haras kodesh davar sheish b'ay netilas neshama. Also touching kodesh is also chayiv, is also netilas neshama. We also get kares for. V'hainu achila. We have to be talking about achila here. So you can't tell me this is talking about touching. Why? The ilu negia leika kares, because by touching kodesh, there's no kares for touching. Rashi says there's a double pashat that you don't get kares for touching for kodesh. So the pasuk here that does a hekesh, it says you get kares, it has to be talking about eating. So we know from the hekesh you can't eat, and the lashon and the Torah uses lashon negia, so we know also negia now. That's the shita of Rish Lakish. That's how Rish Lakish knows also touching and also eating from B'chol Kodesh Siga. You have a hekesh, and it says in the pasuk word negia. Ask the Gemara a new line of questions now. Vakati, can Rish Lakish use it for that? For touching truma? For touching hekesh? He needs this pasuk l'tamei she'achol basa kodesh lifnei zrikas damim. Someone that touches basa kodesh before zrikas damim. So with every korban, there's 4 stages. You go to Kabbalah, you catch the shchita, you first shech the animal, you Kabbalah, you catch the blood, then you walk the mizbeach with the blood, and then you do zrika with the blood, right? If someone touches the, what happened now? The chiv kares of eating the korban is only after zrika. Before zrika, there's no issa kares. It says in the pasuk Mefurish, after Zrika you get kares if you eat Tomei. Again, if someone eats the carbon when he's Tomei, after the Zrika Saddam, he gets kares. What happens if he eats the carbon before the Zrika Saddam? He's Tomei, he can't help but hold himself back. He eats the carbon before the Zrika. What's it then? So it's a machlokes Rebbe and Reish Lakish if he gets malchus or not. It says, someone eats kodesh before you throw the blood. Reish Lakish says you get malchus. Rabbi Yochanan ain't like you don't get malchus. So why does Reish Lakish say you get malchus? Reish Lakish don't like because it says the same pasuk. B'chol kodesh leisiga. Don't touch any kodesh even before zikas damim. L'chayra. So he's using this pasuk. How can you use this pasuk to tell me? How can you use the pasuk to tell me? How can you use this pasuk to tell me? I see we're getting late. How can you use this pasuk to tell me that you get? It's also to touch. It's also to eat. He needs this pasuk to tell me you get malchus kares even if you get malchus even koydem zikas adamim. We'll wrap up here. Leishna lefnei zika v'leishna lachas zika. For Rabbi Yochanan Amar ain't a like. Rabbi Yochanan says you don't get malchus. Rabbi Yochanan says tame. You don't get malchus. Damakra to Masai. He has a hekash of this to Masai. The chiksiv to Masai. When does it say to Masai? You get kares. La'achas zika d'chsiv. It only says you get kares after zika. Okay, we're going to wrap up here. Shkoyach Rabbi, thank you very much.
Steph.